There comes a point where moving on isn't enough. You don't just want to heal. You want to erase him so completely that it's like he never existed in your story at all. Because the danger of holding on, even in small ways, is that he still lives in your thoughts, your emotions, your choices. Every memory, every unanswered question, every little habit tied to him is like a ghost that keeps showing up uninvited. But here's the truth. Erasing him isn't about denial, it's about discipline. It's not about pretending nothing happened, it's about refusing to let what happened define you anymore. When you cut the cords, stop rewriting the past, and rebuild your world without him, you don't just move forward, you rise above. And that's when you erase him forever, not with hate, not with revenge, but with pure indifference. Cutting the cord of memories is the very first and most crucial step if you truly want to erase him forever, because as long as reminders of him linger, he continues to live in your world. Memories aren't just thoughts, they're triggers. A picture, a song, a saved message, even an old gift sitting quietly on your shelf can pull you back into the past in an instant. They act like invisible threads that tether you to him, keeping him alive in your mind long after he's disappeared from your life. And if you want him erased, truly erased, you have to cut those threads deliberately and without hesitation. The problem is, most people hold on to reminders because part of them isn't ready to let go. They keep the photos because they're afraid of forgetting the good times. They keep the texts because they're still searching for hidden meaning. They keep the hoodie or the perfume he liked because it feels comforting. But every time you stumble across these things, you breathe life into him again. It's like lighting a match to reignite a fire you're trying to extinguish. You cannot fully move on while you're still curating a shrine of memories, even in secret. Erasing him forever requires a clean sweep. That means going through your phone and deleting the photos, the messages, the videos. Don't keep them just in case. Don't archive them in a folder you tell yourself you'll never look at. If they exist, the temptation will be there, and that temptation will drag you backward every time you're vulnerable. It also means clearing your physical space, that drawer full of notes, that gift he gave you on your birthday, that piece of clothing that still smells like him. It all has to go. Not because those objects are inherently harmful, but because they carry emotional residue. They're anchors to a past you no longer belong to. This act of clearing isn't about punishment or denial. It's about self-protection. Imagine trying to heal from a wound while constantly pressing on it. That's what it's like to keep reminders around. Each time you see them, you reopen what you're trying to close. By removing them, you give your heart the chance to finally stop bleeding. You create a space where new energy can enter instead of recycling the old. Of course, cutting the cord of memories isn't just physical, it's also mental. Sometimes the most dangerous reminders aren't the things you can see, but the thoughts you replay. The what-ifs, the highlights reel, the imaginary conversations where you say what you never got to say. These are the mental photos and texts you keep scrolling through in your head. Erasing him forever means refusing to indulge those reruns. Each time your mind drifts there, you redirect it not by suppressing the thought, but by replacing it with something stronger. A future goal, a new vision of your life, even the simple act of grounding yourself in the present moment. The more often you do this, the less power those memories have, until eventually they lose their emotional charge altogether. And here's the most liberating part. Once you've cut the cord of memories, you'll realize how much lighter you feel. Without the constant reminders, he stops being a daily presence in your world. The cravings to check, to revisit, to analyze start to weaken. And as they weaken, you discover something even more powerful. You don't actually need those reminders to hold on to who you are. You are not the sum of your memories with him. You existed before him and you'll thrive after him. The only thing the memories are doing is keeping you chained to someone who has no place in your future. So if you truly want to erase him forever, don't leave the cords dangling, waiting for a weak moment to pull you back in. Cut them clean, delete, clear, let go. Create space so vast that his presence no longer echoes in it. When there are no reminders left to cling to, your mind finally begins to accept the truth. He no longer exists in your story. Reclaiming your identity is the next step in erasing him forever, because after being with someone, it's easy to lose sight of who you were before him. Relationships have a way of blending lives, habits, and even personalities, and when it ends, there can be a void that feels like a missing piece of yourself. That's why so many people struggle to fully let go. They've tied so much of who they are to the relationship that they don't know who they are without it. But here's the truth. The fastest way to erase him is to become so deeply invested in your own identity again that his presence feels irrelevant, like a chapter from a book you've long since outgrown. Think about how much of yourself you may have unconsciously shaped around him. Maybe you picked up his tastes in music, his favorite shows, his way of speaking, or even his routines. Maybe your social life revolved around his circle of friends, or your weekends revolved around his plans. Little by little, parts of your individuality got blurred into him, and that's not unusual. It happens in most relationships. But when the relationship ends, instead of seeing the break as losing yourself, you have to reframe it as a chance to rediscover yourself. The breakup doesn't erase you, it frees you. Reclaiming your identity means actively asking, who am I outside of him? What lights me up, not what lit us up. It's about going back to the hobbies, passions, and dreams that you may have neglected. If you loved painting but stopped because your weekends were filled with his activities, now's the time to pick up a brush again. If you once loved to travel, but he wasn't interested, start planning trips on your own or with friends. This isn't about distraction, it's about realignment. You're reclaiming the parts of you that existed long before he entered your life and reminding yourself that you were whole on your own. Another part of reclaiming your identity is rewriting the story you tell yourself about who you are now. Many people after a breakup say, I don't even recognize myself anymore, or he took a part of me with him, but that narrative keeps you stuck in victimhood. Instead, the story needs to be, I am rediscovering parts of myself that I had put on hold. Or even better, I am becoming someone even stronger, more authentic, and more alive than I was before. This shift in perspective is what allows you to see the breakup as a transformation instead of a loss. It's also about rebuilding your confidence. Sometimes relationships, especially those that end badly, leave us questioning our worth. You may start to wonder if you weren't enough, if you could have done something differently, if maybe he defined your value. But reclaiming your identity means reminding yourself that your worth was never tied to his opinion of you. Your worth comes from your character, your choices, your heart, your ambitions, your resilience. And the more you invest in living from that place, the less room there is for him to exist in your world. This reclamation also requires surrounding yourself with people who affirm who you are now, not who you were with him. Spend time with friends who remind you of your strengths, who encourage your passions, who see you for the individual you are. Create new environments that reinforce your independence, whether it's joining a fitness class, signing up for a course, or immersing yourself in a community that reflects your growth. Every new experience builds the new you, and every new you makes the old us fade into irrelevance. The most powerful part of reclaiming your identity is realizing that you're not just getting back to who you were before him. You're becoming someone even better. You're integrating the lessons, the growth, and the resilience that came from the relationship and its ending. You're not erasing yourself along with him. You're erasing him by elevating yourself. And when your sense of self becomes so rooted in your own passions, your own values, your own life direction, he simply stops mattering. He doesn't exist in this new version of you because your identity no longer makes space for him. In the end, forgetting him isn't about emptying yourself. It's about filling yourself so fully with your own life, your own identity, that there's no room left for him. When you reclaim who you are and stand firmly in it, you erase him not by force, but by evolution. He becomes irrelevant because your life is too expansive, too rich, and too yours to hold a space for someone who doesn't belong in it anymore. Detaching your emotions is the hardest part of erasing him forever because while cutting physical reminders and reclaiming your identity are tangible steps, emotions often linger in places we can't control. You can throw away the gifts, delete the photos, and block his number, but if your heart still leaps at the mention of his name or aches when you pass a familiar spot, then he still holds a place inside you. Emotional detachment isn't about pretending you never cared. It's about training your mind and heart to stop giving energy to someone who no longer deserves it. The first step in detaching emotionally is understanding that feelings don't vanish overnight, and that's okay. What matters is not whether the feelings exist, but whether you feed them. Every time you replay conversations in your head, stalk his social media, or analyze his actions, you're feeding the emotional connection. Detachment requires starving that connection. It means refusing to indulge in the habit of reopening the wound just to feel something. Instead, you redirect that energy into places that actually serve you. It also means reinterpreting the emotional narrative you've built around him. Often, people stay attached not to the person themselves, but to the idea of what they represented. The comfort, the attention, the future you imagined together. That illusion becomes harder to let go of than the actual individual. Emotional detachment requires reminding yourself of the truth. He is not the dream you built in your head. He is simply a person with flaws, limitations, and choices that made the relationship impossible. The more clearly you see him as he is not as you imagined him, the easier it becomes to let go of the emotional hold he has on you. Another powerful way to detach is to stop romanticizing the past. Memory has a way of editing itself, highlighting the good moments and blurring out the painful ones. That selective recall makes you cling to emotions long after the relationship has ended. The antidote is honesty. Instead of replaying the one beautiful night when everything felt perfect, remind yourself of the countless days you felt unseen, unloved, or undervalued. This doesn't mean living in bitterness, it means living in truth. Emotional detachment grows when you stop seeing the past as something to long for and start seeing it as something that taught you what you will never accept again. It's also essential to build new emotional anchors. Right now, so many of your emotional triggers are tied to him. Places you went, songs you heard together, routines you shared. To erase him, you need to overwrite those connections with new ones. Visit new places, create new routines, and build new memories with people who bring you joy. Each new emotional anchor weakens the old ones until eventually the power of those past triggers fades into nothing. Detachment doesn't mean apathy toward life. It means apathy toward him. You can still feel deeply, love passionately, and live fully, but you choose not to waste those emotions on someone who is no longer part of your story. It's the act of putting up a boundary in your heart. I do not invest my love, my pain, or my longing into someone who cannot value it. That boundary becomes the filter through which your emotions flow, ensuring that what once tied you to him no longer has access to your inner world. And the more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. At first, the detachment may feel forced, almost like you're faking it. But with repetition, your heart learns. You begin to notice that his name no longer stings, that his absence no longer feels like a wound, and that your days no longer revolve around what he's doing or thinking. What once consumed you now barely crosses your mind, and that's when you realize you've detached. The real beauty of emotional detachment is that it frees you to feel again in healthier ways. When you erase him from your emotional life, you make space for better connections built on mutual respect, care, and love. More importantly, you reconnect with your own emotions in a way that strengthens you instead of draining you. And when your emotions are finally yours again, he ceases to exist in your heart. That's when you know you've truly erased him, not by numbing yourself, but by refusing to give him the privilege of your feelings anymore. Rewriting your environment is one of the most underrated yet powerful ways to erase him forever, because the spaces you live in and the routines you follow are deeply tied to memory. Your environment acts like a silent storyteller. It holds traces of him in the places you went together, the things you used to do, and the atmosphere you built when he was still in your life. If you don't change it, you keep walking through a museum of the past every day, even if you've already decided to move on. That's why rewriting your environment isn't about redecorating for style. It's about consciously creating a new atmosphere where he no longer exists. Think about your surroundings for a moment. Is your room still holding onto items he gave you or places you set up together? Does your daily routine take you through the same coffee shop where you used to meet, or the same park where you walked together? If so, you're unintentionally reliving him, even when you're not aware of it. These environmental triggers sneak up on you, making the past feel alive again, pulling you back into the emotions you're trying to leave behind. Rewriting your environment means intentionally removing, rearranging, and recreating the spaces and habits that tie you to him, so that they no longer whisper his name every time you walk by. Start with your physical space, your room, your home, your car. These are places you control. Look around and ask yourself, does this space represent me now, or does it still reflect who I was when he was here? If it's the latter, it's time for a reset. Clear out anything that carries emotional weight tied to him. Replace the bedding you once cuddled in together. Put away the decor that reminds you of his taste. Get rid of the little objects that hold stories. Then fill your space with things that reflect the new you, new colors, new photos, new scents, new energy. It's not about erasing the past physically. It's about creating an environment that tells your story, not the story of you and him. Then move on to your routines. Routines are powerful because they form the structure of your life, and if those routines were built around him, they will keep him present long after he's gone. Did you always talk to him at night before bed? Replace that time with journaling, reading, or a nighttime ritual that's just yours. Did weekends revolve around his plans? Start creating your own traditions, brunch with friends, solo adventures, new classes. By replacing the old patterns, you overwrite the rhythm of your life so that his absence is no longer a gap you feel, but a freedom you celebrate. Rewriting your environment also means expanding beyond your usual spaces. If certain streets, restaurants, or neighborhoods are filled with his shadow, give yourself permission to explore new ones. Discover new favorite places, build new memories with people who support you, and deliberately associate joy with experiences that have nothing to do with him. The more you step into fresh environments, the less weight the old ones hold, until eventually they lose their power over you. It's important to understand that this isn't about running away from the past. It's about reclaiming your power in the present. Your environment should support your healing, not sabotage it. If being in certain places or around certain reminders keeps reopening wounds, then choosing new surroundings is an act of strength, not avoidance. You're saying to yourself, I deserve a life where my spaces nurture me, not haunt me, And here's the beauty of rewriting your environment. As your outer world shifts, your inner world follows. When you wake up in a room that feels fresh and authentically yours, you feel different. When you walk through spaces untainted by him, your mind feels free. When your routines belong to you again, your days no longer feel like they're missing someone. They feel complete because they're designed by and for you. Over time, the combination of these changes works like a quiet erasure. His presence becomes less and less tied to your surroundings, until one day you realize you can move through your life without stumbling over his ghost. And that's when you know your environment is no longer a museum of the past, but a canvas for your future. You haven't just rewritten the space, you've rewritten the story, and in this new story, he doesn't exist. Focusing on your future self is one of the most powerful ways to erase him forever, because it shifts your attention away from the past and places it firmly where it belongs, on the life you're creating. The truth is, you can't forget someone by standing still. If your mind is stuck replaying the story of what happened, or worse, imagining how things could have been, you're anchoring yourself to a chapter that's already over. The only way to truly erase him is to give yourself such a compelling future that the past starts to feel small, insignificant, and irrelevant in comparison. When you begin to focus on your future self, you stop asking questions like, "Why did he do this?" or "What if it had worked out?" and you start asking, "What do I want to create next?" That question shifts your energy from longing to building. Instead of clinging to a version of yourself tied to him, you design a version of yourself that has nothing to do with him at all. You're not trying to prove anything to him or show him what he lost. You're proving to yourself how much more there is ahead of you than there ever was behind you. Your future self becomes a magnet pulling you forward. Think about what she looks like, how she walks, how she spends her days, who she spends them with. Imagine her energy, her confidence, her joy. The more vividly you picture her, the more you realize she doesn't spend her nights scrolling through old texts or her mornings wondering what he's doing. She's too busy living, too busy thriving, too busy creating a life that excites her. That image of your future self becomes your compass, guiding every decision you make now. And here's the key. Every small step you take toward that vision makes him fade. When you sign up for a class that excites you, you're investing in your future self. When you save money for a trip you've always dreamed of, you're investing in her experiences. When you take care of your health, nurture your friendships, or chase a new goal, you're building her life brick by brick. Each brick you lay is a statement that your future matters more than your past, and in that process, his existence shrinks until it feels irrelevant. Focusing on your future self also gives you a new perspective on the breakup. Instead of seeing it as something that destroyed you, you start to see it as the very thing that propelled you into growth. Without the pain, you may never have been motivated to evolve, to chase bigger dreams, to demand higher standards. Suddenly, he's not the center of the story. He's just a footnote in the chapter that set you on the path to becoming who you were meant to be. The beauty of this approach is that it doesn't rely on suppressing emotions or forcing yourself to move on. It works naturally because as your future grows brighter, the past loses its hold. You don't need to fight the memories, they simply stop being important. The version of you who once cared about him doesn't even exist anymore because your future self has replaced her. You've outgrown the version of yourself that made him matter, and in doing so, you've erased him without effort. This is the ultimate victory, not to erase him out of anger, not to forget him out of bitterness, but to move so powerfully into your future that he simply dissolves into nothingness. He doesn't exist in the story of your future self. She is too focused on her purpose, her happiness, her growth, and her love for herself. When you live for her, he becomes exactly what he should have been all along, a lesson, not a legacy. Living in indifference is the final stage of erasing him forever, because it represents the ultimate freedom. Indifference isn't anger, it isn't sadness, and it isn't even forced positivity. It's neutrality. It's when he no longer holds any emotional weight in your life, when his name doesn't trigger a reaction, when his memory doesn't carry pain or nostalgia. Indifference means he simply doesn't matter, not because you've suppressed your feelings, but because you've outgrown the need for him to matter at all. That's when you know you've erased him completely, when he doesn't exist in your emotional world anymore. The mistake many people make is thinking that forgetting someone has to come through rage or bitterness. They say things like, "I'll show him," or "one day he'll regret losing me." And while that fire can be useful at first, it still ties you to him. If you're trying to prove something, then in some way he still matters. If you're hoping karma gets him back, he's still present in your story. Indifference is different. It doesn't seek revenge. It doesn't hope for his downfall. And it doesn't care whether he notices you thriving or not. It's peace. It's a complete lack of investment in his existence. Indifference is powerful because it shifts the balance of control. When you care even negatively, you're still giving energy, anger, sadness, longing, regret. All of these are forms of caring. And the more you care, the more he exists in your mind. But when you reach indifference, you take back all of that energy. You stop giving him a seat at the table of your thoughts. You stop measuring your worth against his actions. He no longer gets to rent space in your head or your heart, because you've decided to use that space for better things. Living in indifference also means you stop engaging with the subtle hooks that keep him alive in your world. You don't check his social media, not because you're forcing yourself not to, but because you genuinely don't feel the need. You don't bring his name up in conversations, not because you're avoiding it, but because he's irrelevant to the story you're telling now. You don't wonder if he thinks about you because the answer doesn't matter. Indifference is not fighting the urge to care, it's the absence of the urge altogether. What makes indifference so liberating is that it allows you to live fully in the present. Instead of living in the shadow of what happened, you step into the light of what's happening now. You enjoy your coffee without it reminding you of mornings with him. You listen to a song without associating it with him. You go to new places without feeling his absence. Life becomes about you again, and in that process, he fades into the background like a character from a story you barely remember reading. The journey to indifference isn't always quick, but it's worth it. At first, you may feel like you're pretending, like you're acting indifferent while still secretly caring. That's normal because emotional detachment takes practice. But every time you choose to disengage, every time you redirect your focus, you weaken the thread that ties you to him. Eventually, those threads snap completely, and you find yourself genuinely unaffected. What once hurt, what once consumed you, now barely registers, and that is the mark of true healing. And here's the real beauty. Indifference is the ultimate erasure because it's not about pushing him away. It's about living so fully, so authentically, that there's simply no space left for him. He doesn't need to be forgotten intentionally. He fades naturally, like smoke disappearing into the air. When you live in indifference, you don't just erase him, you transcend him. He becomes nothing, not because you forced it, but because your life grew too big for him to have a place in it anymore. Erasing him forever isn't about pretending nothing happened. It's about refusing to let what happened define you anymore. You cut the cords of memories so you're no longer haunted by reminders. You reclaim your identity so you stand tall in who you are without him. You detach your emotions so he no longer controls your heart. You rewrite your environment so the spaces around you nourish your growth instead of keeping you stuck. You focus on your future self so the life ahead becomes more magnetic than the past you've left behind. And finally, You live in indifference, not because you hardened your heart, but because you've expanded it beyond the need for him to matter. This journey isn't about revenge, and it isn't about proving your worth to someone who failed to see it. It's about building a life so rich, so meaningful, and so fully yours that his absence feels irrelevant. When you've erased him forever, you don't just move on, you rise. You step into a version of yourself that is stronger, freer, and more alive than you ever were with him. And the best part, he no longer exists in your story, not because you pushed him out, but because you simply wrote a new one where he has no place. That is true power, that is freedom, and that is how you erase him forever, like he never existed.